morning, good afternoon, good evening, or if you're watching this as a podcast, hello the future. I know we're being viewed in the States today, and we'll see who else joins us later on. I see that our guest has arrived. She's waving at me. I'd better introduce her quickly. This is Professor Nikki Clayton.
Hello.
Welcome, Nikki. How lovely to see you. Right on time. I thought I was going to have to cover in case your earlier meeting overran, but
no, I'm a punctual girl.
You are very, indeed. Yes, amazingly so. Not only that, but you're a gifted person in the sense of not being stereotypical, one-track minded. You're both a scientist and a creative arts person too.
Thank you.
Well, I like that because few of us are one-trick ponies, and I don't think we should be put into categories too readily. I mean, we all like music for a start, don't we?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was a semi-professional musician at one stage, many years ago in my career. Although,
what instrument did you play?
Electric guitar.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah,
I'm like a licorice stick. In conventional world, it's called a clarinet.
Yes.
Licorice stick.
Yeah, at one stage, I used to play backing rhythm guitar for a clarinetist stroke saxophone player who we had a sort of a jazz sort of outfit. Yeah.
Sax is my second instrument, yeah.
Yeah, that's fun. Of course, the fingering's all different, so you've got to have two parts to your brain for that. That's a bit of cognition right there.
And I could only play the little one because I've got little hands and little feet.
Oh, right. Yes, okay. Well, anyway,
They don't stretch far.
No. So that was Elton John's problem. He couldn't become a concert pianist because he could only just barely get the octave.
Yeah.
He didn't do too badly though, did he?
He's done all right, hasn't he? You know, on the scale of things, he's had a blooming good career, let's face it.
Yes. Anyway, I'm glad that I've found another person who straddles the science-art boundary, because if you go back a little while, before technology, you had to straddle the science-art boundary because you couldn't take photographs. So you had to be a good drawer stroke artist. I mean, if you think of the early naturalists, like, what's his name? Gilbert White, is it?
Mm-hmm.
He produced some fantastic artwork.
You know, at the Royal Society, they have an amazing archive. I'd love to show you, but obviously in lockdown, it's not possible. But dream for the future. They have amazing archive of all these scientists, not just Da Vinci, who's obviously the most famous of them all for this.
Yeah.
All the detailed artistic endeavors they went to before the days of technology to document the phenomenon they were seeing.
Yes. Last time I went there, they had a display featuring the music from Tom Lehrer for his song about the elements.
Oh.
And to me, it can blah, 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 to one of Gilbert and Sullivan melodies. You know the one?
Yeah.
Anyway, tell me, because I've had a lot of guests on here, including Sophie Scott, who is in a similar sort of field to you. And I had to ask her what neuroscientist was, because it sort of evolved, not really out of psychology, has it? It's an upstart, a new thing altogether that's dependent on technology. And you're described in your field as a comparative cognition specialist. What's that?
Well, I think when I first became a professor at Cambridge, I founded the term comparative cognition. The common term beforehand was comparative psychology. The idea behind comparative psychology, if you live in psychology world, is that comparison means you compare how animals think with how humans think.
Yes.
So it's asking about the biological basis of cognition in human beings. And it's asking whether and to what extent non-verbal creatures have the same abilities.
Yes.
But my background or my training originally was in zoology. And in fact, when I went to Oxford, they don't do a joint degree in psychology and biology, which is what I would have been my ideal choice.
Yes.
So I had to choose either zoology or psychology and philosophy, and they both sounded brilliant.
Yes.
Both could be great. And then one of the people interviewing me, now Lord Krebs of Whiteham, John Krebs.
Oh, one of the Krebs family.
Yeah, Hans Krebs' son, who always as a kid wanted to be a footballer, but there you go. And he's got gorgeous legs for it.
I'll tell him you said that.
Yeah, I do. And give him lots of love and kisses from little Nicky. But he sort of said, well, if you do zoology, you can do a bird research project, because he realised early on I was obsessed with birds. I've always wanted to be a bird. I've always wanted to fly. I've got invisible wings.
Yes. Okay.
I can't really see them. They're here. I guess the fact they're invisible means you can't see them. Silly me. It's late in the evening.
Stay grounded, at least for the show.
I'll try. I'm perching. I'm not flying. But that's always what I wanted to do. I wanted to know what it was like to see like a bird, to think like a bird. And
so you invented your own field.
In a way. Yeah. And comparative cognition, the idea was that we could use comparative in a new way. It didn't have to just be animal versus human. It could also be comparing different animals.
Yes. Well, we had an earlier guest was, you may know him, Dr. Ed Morris, or was it Morrison? Morris, I think, from Portsmouth University. He's an evolutionary psychologist. And yeah. Of course, once upon a time, it wasn't acceptable to think in terms of evolution and psychology as a unit.
No.
There was the humans, and then some distance down, there were the animals.
Yeah.
And we were of a different order. We could think, and they couldn't. But we know that's not true.
Absolutely.
And you're one of the people who's shown us that it's not true. There was, you had a video about, was it crows or jays or jackdaws?
I don't know. I've got lots of videos. What behaviour were they doing?
Was it solving a problem, a puzzle, a course that they had to pull on strings, and I can't remember. It was a 4-minute video.
Oh, I don't know which one it would be, but they all do it. There's one we've got on the Inside the Animal Mind TV program, starring homage to the late Sean Connery. This was 007, and he was a gorgeous, very dark-looking New Caledonian crow. He had a kind of Scottish tinge to him, which is why we called him 007. Anyway, he was fantastic, and he did an 8-stage problem-solving task.
That's probably the one.
Is that the one?
was about a 4-minute video. I think it was on the Cambridge Video site.
Okay, yeah. There's probably Dr. Alex Taylor, who's now a senior lecturer at the University of Auckland, but he did his postdoc with me, and amazing man and an amazing crow. It was a brilliant combination.
You don't happen to have the link for that, do you? Available?
No, unfortunately not on this computer, but it was an 8-step problem-solving task. But we do have a paper that's just come out in the Proceedings of the Royal Society showing the complexity with which the New Caledonian crows can not just problem solve, but use problem-solving skills to plan for the future. And that's pretty amazing. So they can plan for alternative futures. And what's especially cool about it is that there are people that in the past have been major protagonists saying, no, only humans can plan for the future.
Yes.
And 2 people that were saying, no, only humans can plan for the future. Well, one of them changed his mind in 2013, and the other one is the co-author on this paper. So it's kind of cool because it has build forward. And he's helped us as well because, he's helped us say, well, as a skeptic, the issue with the way this is designed is blah, blah, blah. So together, by combining our strengths, we've really moved the field forward by saying, well, what would convince you as the skeptic? And then design the experiment, run the experiment together. And now we show that the crows can do those things. So that's kind of a really nice way of scientific collaboration, really.
Yes, and actually converting a skeptic too, that's very satisfactory.
Yeah.
So do they learn these things or do they spontaneously invent them? Or is it both?
It's both. I mean, you can't plan for the future unless you have some kind of experience of what the future might hold.
Yes.
So they have to have some experience, right? If I've no idea that umbrellas protect me from the rain, how could I possibly think in case it rains, I should take an umbrella with me?
Yes.
So there has to be some learning.
Yes.
But the point is, it shouldn't be a lot of learning where it's a habit. If it's the case, I always take an umbrella with me in case it rains, then I'm not planning for the future.
Right.
I'm thinking I've had a past experience where it's rained and the umbrella was really helpful.
Yes.
I've had lots of experiences where I haven't needed an umbrella. And suddenly now I look at my weather app on my phone and think, oh, it looks like it could rain. Perhaps I should take the umbrella with me. So
there's an input of thought going on there, planning.
Yeah, that's the point. It's the thoughtful planning, isn't it?
So one of the difficulties is that we tend to anthropomorphize, don't we? I mean, there's lots of videos you can see now on Facebook and other social media sites, Twitter in particular, where it appears that animals are behaving in an intellectually human-like way, but are they actually doing that, or are we interpreting what they're doing for their animal reasons in that light? I'll give you an example. There's a video of a dog owner scolding his dog for doing some disgusting behavior. And the man says, he's off camera, you don't see the man, you just see the dog. The man says, blah, 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 some sentence or other, and the dog seemingly waits for him to finish and then tries to vocalize in barks himself. And then the man says the next phrase, and the dog pauses, and then without interrupting the man, he comes back and makes his comment in bark language, and he's you can see he's trying to articulate the sounds. He's trying not to do one constant bark, but to do a variety of barks. So it looks, to all intents and purposes, as though he understands something about conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So how would we be able to actually test that rather than taking my anecdotal account?
Well, it's a good question. And of course, probably with the animal in question, you couldn't, because you don't know the previous reinforcement histories that animal has had. So what you need is an interventionist approach. You need to be able to piecemeal back the various experiences. And that's why experiments that are able to control the previous environmental history are so important. So if I give you a counterexample, you can see rooks on the M4 memory service station pulling up the liner together, and it looks like cooperative behavior, and it looks like tool use because they're using the bin lines to get food they wouldn't otherwise be able to obtain. So it looks like it looks coordinated. So only you need at least 2 individuals to do it in a synchronized way. And it takes them at least 20 pulls to be able to do it. Now that's great. It looks really impressive. You need then experiments to actually unpick each of these things to check whether those are assumptions or not. So you need to then say, okay, if in the laboratory where we know they haven't had prior experiences, for example, because we've hand raised them and we know that they haven't had those past experiences that we think might be crucial for this development, does it show evidence of an understanding of time, of being able to delay to get a reward? Do they have an understanding of teamwork to be able to do it?
Yes.
Is there any evidence that they can spontaneously use tools in an environment they wouldn't ordinarily do it? And if you can pick apart those things and show that at each level they can do it, then you can interweave them together and use converging evidence to bear on a problem and say, well, no, I can't prove anything, because I can't prove anything in a behavioural sense. But what I can do is say that if at each level I can show evidence of that and I can integrate them together, then I've got overwhelming evidence to support this suggestion.
Right,
you can do.
Accumulation of evidence, yes.
So it's an accumulation of evidence, and it's converging evidences. It's not, I've got this pile of evidence over here and I've got this pile of evidence over there. They've got to come together in some sense.
Overlapping, if possible.
Overlapping, yeah.
Yeah. So if you've raised them from very young, then you have the problem that they sort of think they're people, don't they? I mean, the early behaviourist, I forget his name right now, who had the ducklings imprinted on him. Somebody in the group will tell me.
Do you mean Conrad Lorenz?
That's it. He's the man. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So I'm pretty sure that those ducklings, who obviously thought he was their mum because he was the first person they saw when they hatched, didn't behave in a very typical duckling way, apart from maybe what they were instinctively provided with by genetics.
Well, I think it's a be damned if you do and be damned if you don't, because ideally, and again, I'm going to go back to the idea of converging evidences to bear on a problem, because if you can show that in the lab with strict controls they do X, And then you can show, but when I look at this in the wild, they also do something that's remarkably similar to X. Then that's your best evidence that what you've been testing really is a reflection of what they do in the wild, but with the right level of psychological controls to claim that you understand the mechanism behind it.
Yes, lots of controls. I can see this is not an easy subject to study.
It isn't an easy subject. People think it's easy. I only need to look into the eyes of a dog to know that it's clever. Really?
Yes.
What is cleverness, and why do I need to look into the eyes, and why does looking into the eyes tell me it's clever? That doesn't sound very scientific. So how else are we going to do it?
No. Well, we do think like that, though, don't we? I mean, somehow intelligence and eyes seem to go together.
Well, yes, especially for our species, because we're so visual.
Yes.
I mean, we use visual and auditory cues. There are things. We're not very good at smell.
No. But goats' eyes don't count, of course, because they look like the devil.
Well, don't get me onto crows in that regard. Look at Hitchcock's The Birds.
Yeah.
That was bad press for clever crows, I think.
What a fantastic film.
It was, though. Very clever.
So we see, as I said, on Facebook, I've seen some videos. There was one where the swans are feeding fish.
Oh, I don't know that one.
No? The swans have got access to some food, and they're a great big cup coming up to the surface of the pond, opening their massive mouths, and the swans are stuffing this food down. Is that a reflex that they do to anything that comes up and opens a mouth?
It could be just begging behaviour, couldn't it? Could be a response to begging behaviour.
Like they do to their cygnets.
Yeah.
Yes. And the other one I've seen even today features a condor, enormous bird, and it's
seriously big bird.
It's landed, and it's coming to thank the man who raised it. It remembers him, and it's coming, and it's nuzzling up to him with its head and its neck, and he's giving it a scratch. And if only it could, it would be putting its arms round him. Wings aren't ideal for that.
Wow.
So these are some of the things that make it very difficult to refute the idea that there's a continuum of empathy, of intelligence, of cognition from quite low down in, I'm going to use that expression, the animal kingdom.
I think my favourite example is gift giving in crows. You know about this?
No.
So it was made famous a couple of years ago by a young girl. I think she was about 9 years of age. And there were crows coming to her garden in California. And she started putting out lots of food for the birds. They started giving her gifts. And there was a big documentary about it, and lots of press and New Scientist and various other semi-popularist scientific journals about it.
I'm remembering it now. They brought some shiny things.
And marbles and walnuts. And then her mum lost her wedding ring, and the crows, the story, as the story goes anyway, the crows placed the wedding ring on the bird table.
Well, that's pushing it a bit, I think. Stretching credibility a bit there. But the other curious thing is, these are avian dinosaurs, aren't they?
Well, they're definitely avian. Why do you call them dinosaurs?
Well, I was having a conversation with a couple of paleontologists recently,
Mm-hmm.
and they say that the likelihood is that the dinosaurs weren't fully extinguished at the end of the Jurassic, but that the survivors are the little ones with wings and feathers.
Yeah.
Do you not?
Yeah, no, fair enough. I just thought it'd be good to explain to the audience how you'd come up with that theory, that's all.
Yes, yes. Well, they have a lot skeletally in common with the dinosaurs, particularly around the hips, don't they? Where they...
Well, you only have to take a baby bird and hand raise it and look at it, and gosh, they look like baby dinosaurs.
Yes, yes, that's right. They do. Yes, especially before they've got their feathers.
That's what I mean. Yeah, when they're just a few days old. Yeah.
Fledglings. Yes.
Yeah. No, long before fledglings. Yeah, when they're just still nestlings. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Quite bald. Yes.
Yeah.
So the thing is, if they come from such a different branch of evolution, and obviously they've converged with the mammalian branch to produce this intellect, and part of your work has been about how crows are probably close to chimpanzees in intelligence.
You mean feathered apes?
Yes, yes, that's right. Yes. Would you tell us about that?
So the idea is that the crows or corvids and the chimpanzees or great apes shared a common ancestor over 300 million years ago. It's a long time ago. And they've got completely different brains in terms of architecture. Because bird brains are like, well, they're nuclear. They're like a fruitcake. And mammalian brains are structured like Austrian chocolate sachet torte.
Whoa, hang on a minute.
6 layers. Well, they've got the 6 layers, right? Whereas the bird brain is all jumbled up like a fruitcake.
Really? Oh, that's interesting. So,
or if you want a different analogy, a bird brain is like a pepperoni pizza, and a mammalian brain is like a bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich, I believe. I say I believe. I'm vegetarian. I've not eaten meat since 11, but there you go.
I think some of our audience will know what a BLT is.
Yeah, exactly. So it's organised completely differently.
Let me unpick that a bit.
Yeah.
Is this grey matter and white matter that's scattered around in the bird brain compared to the mammalian brain, which has the white matter in the middle and the grey matter on the outside?
No.
What's scattered? Is it the various...
it's the neurons.
Yes.
So it literally is the architecture. It's the organisation. You know, it's like talking about, by analogy, I suppose, old cities and Bauhaus cities.
Uh-huh.
So it's a completely different organisation, but the connections are the same.
So their brains are much smaller too, aren't they, than many of the more intelligent mammals?
Everything's smaller, right?
Yes.
Bodies are smaller as well as brains.
Yes. So it's the ratio.
Relative brain size. Their brains are as big as that of chimpanzees.
Ah, right.
So if you were to, an interesting comparison is take a pigeon and a crow. So they're the same body size.
Yes.
And they're both birds. So obviously, you know, everything else is weight reduced, you know, no teeth, hollow bones, all the rest of it for flying. But a crow's brain is 4 times the size of a pigeon's brain.
Ah, right. Yes.
So it's a bit like the comparison between a leaf-eating monkey and a fruit-eating monkey. So a squirrel monkey and a howler monkey, same kind of thing. They might have the same body size and the same other kinds of constraints, but the one has a much bigger brain than the other.
Is this to do with diet in any way? Do we have bigger brains?
Well, crows eat a lot more foods than pigeons.
Yes.
That's for sure. But I suppose for me, there are certain very simple tests, like the eyeball test. And I suppose if you think about nests, if you think about a rook's nest, they're up at the top of trees. But how many smashed eggs do you see at the bottom, even though they're in very tall trees? I've never seen a smashed rook egg.
No.
Pigeons' eggs are always smashed. They build nests with holes in them.
Yeah, that's true.
Doesn't seem very smart to me.
No. Well,
I'm not saying that architecture is the only sign of intelligence, but there's the wonderful Bronowski saying that the hand is the maker of the mind. And I think anything you can do creatively about building, whether it's building a structure like a nest or building an amazing city or building a fantastic choreographic new dance display or music, they're all about building, but they're also all about creativity, and they're all about planning ahead.
Yes. Well, that makes sense. And one of the reasons why it's good to meet a scientist that's not so thinkered, narrow-minded, and one-trick pony is because isn't creativity, aren't the arts and the cultures, and isn't that the pinnacle of human achievement?
Yes. So for me, if you were to ask me what makes us as a species different from other animals, it's a very special form of mental time travel. It's storytelling.
Narrative.
Yeah. Well, I think storytelling can go with and without words, but I think the reason we've got the complexity of language we've got is because of storytelling. If you want to just go, the loser over there, I can just point.
Yes.
I can gesture, I can jump up and down and do that with my legs. And
Yes.
I'm from a different culture and we don't speak the same language, but we can do it gesturally.
Yes.
We want to know where predators are, where fear is. We can do pointing and those other sign languages. But what gestures don't give you is the complexities of stories, especially in places that stories take you both verbally and non-verbally, but to places that never exist other than in the mind's eye.
Yes, yes. The book was a big breakthrough, wasn't it? The writing, the ability to store thoughts so that you could get inside somebody else's head, even if they died centuries ago.
Absolutely. And I think, people can argue with me about whether other animals have language and they can give me different definitions of language. Oh, isn't the honeybee dance a kind of language?
Yes.
Whatever. But what I would say definitively is no other animal that we know of on this planet, with the exception of Homo sapiens, can read and write and tell stories in the way that we as a species understand.
That's interesting. That's interesting because people who study the origin of language find themselves going down the evolution of the human race.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it all goes back to Africa.
Yeah. And I think it's so interesting, you know, I often talk, so as you know, I have a science arts, well, two main science arts collaborations, and I think that in both of them explore storytelling non-verbally as well as verbally.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that. Why does the ballet Rambert need a scientist?
You'd have to ask them why they need a scientist. In fact, ask Mark Baldwin. I've been working with him for 12 years now, but I think he feels it's useful, and I feel that every day the work we do together inspires my life. So what can I say?
Yeah.
We both find it useful, but I guess the whole idea of thinking about the role of storytelling non-linguistically or non-verbally, and the ways in which you can express things. So I suppose I'd go back to what language can and cannot tell us.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd start with something like Zeno's paradox and say, before Leipzig and Newton, people were very puzzled with how the arrow could ever arrive at the target when you thought that, and I don't know if I can say this properly at this time of night, but an infinitely large number of infinitesimally small fractions, how did the arrow ever arrive at its target? So you go from a half to a quarter to an eighth to a 16th and blah, 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 blah. But you keep getting to a smaller and smaller fraction. But it's never zero. And it wasn't until we understood the calculus, principle tending to zero, that we understood how the arrow could arrive. So sometimes having some kind of non-verbal linguistic notation helped the brain think about things it couldn't think about. And I think what contemporary dance does, for example, and you could say ballet does it brilliantly with storytelling, but I think contemporary dance in particular gives great examples of things, of being able to represent in interesting ways abstract principles the brain has difficulty with. So, for example, I worked with Mark Baldwin, who was then the artistic director at Rambert, and something called The Strange Charm of Mother Nature. And we used, through dance, we were trying to get at physical principles about quarks, hence the strange charm of Mother Nature, but contrasting how physicists think about breaking up of time intervals and the psychology of mental time travel, where time is all relative and it depends on your frame of mind and your emotion and your point of view, and then you revisit your memory and realize that what you're remembering is completely different from what you just experienced. And you can shortcut those ideas in such interesting ways non-verbally through something like contemporary dance.
Wow. So
I don't know if that makes any sense, but
yeah. So ballet, or traditional ballet, is more about acting out known human conditions.
Yes.
Whereas contemporary dance is more emotionally expressive of the moment.
Contemporary dance tells a completely different story. It doesn't tell a story we know.
Yes.
It invents its own new story.
Yes, a bit like jazz.
Yeah, well, I'm a musician, so I empathise with that. Yes, it's about exploring an idea. It's about not necessarily knowing the story before it's happened, but discovering the story as a consequence of the process.
So the creative arts, they're about pleasure, aren't they? Whatever that is. They're about
beauty in a way, aren't they? That's a bit risky statement to say, isn't it?
about communicating pleasure and other emotions.
Yeah.
But some of our comments here, they want us to get back to birds. So I'm going to put up a question for you. Do any birds have culture? Not characteristics, not crows liking shiny things, but something closer to communal cohesion. Thank you, Jason.
Ooh.
Jason is in San Diego. We're being watched around the world.
Wow. I would say that the best example of culture I can think of, it's not to say it's the best example I can think of right now, would be the New Caledonian crows and chimpanzees using tools.
Yes.
Because they have access to the same kinds of tools, but in different cultures, they use different ones. So it's not about they only have access to these ones and that's why they do it. But in this culture, we do it this way.
Yes.
And in that culture, we do it that way.
Yes.
So I think that's probably the best example I can think of.
Well, that's very interesting. It's a bit like human societies having their own cooking techniques, for example.
Yeah. So, for example, on the island of Moray in New Caledonia, some crows like to use thick, straight tools from the pandanus leaf. Others like really thin ones. And some make what's called step tools. So they have a thin bit, then a slightly thicker bit, then another thicker bit. And some of them just have 2 steps, so thin, then slightly thicker. Some have 3, some have 4. And you see these little groups of birds within the island all doing it the same way, even though all the same materials are available.
Right. So they stick to their traditional techniques.
Yeah, traditions. That's culture, surely.
Yes, it must be, mustn't it? Yes. And I've heard quite recently that bird song is sort of tribal as well, or they have accents. The same birds in the north of England speak with a different twang to down in the south.
So my favourite example of that is work that was done in California by the late Luis Baptista. Now, Luis Baptista was an amazing man because he came from the island of Macau and he grew up in America. And he spoke a lot of different languages. So he was fluent in English, American English, Portuguese, Chinese, Japanese. He also spoke Italian, Spanish, French. But more impressively than all of that, he spoke a number of different bird accents as well. And in particular, there were white-crowned sparrows. He was the director of the Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. And there were these white-crowned sparrows that had different dialects depending on where they'd come from, which bit of California.
Yeah.
He was a fantastic bird mimic.
Yes.
So good that he could fool the other white-crowned sparrows. And he could mimic the different dialects of white-crowned sparrows, and they would fly up to him thinking, who the heck is this?
Yes.
This intruder in my territory.
Yes.
And he was amazing. But yeah, the different white-crowned sparrows had different dialects, and where the local ones met from different areas, they have hybrids.
Oh, right.
So like if you imagine, I'm from Lancashire, from Blackpool originally, that's where my accent's from. If you imagine the Lancashire mixes with the Yorkshire.
Oh, right, yeah.
Do the twang, and they can switch. So he's a Lancashire guy, so I'll speak Lancashire. He's a Yorkshire guy, so I'll switch to I can't do it, but if I could, I'd love to demonstrate.
Yes.
you could switch to the Yorkshire twang. And the birds were really fussy. They were only interested in the ones that could speak the same dialect.
Oh, they couldn't switch.
They could learn to switch, is the really interesting thing. But the females were only interested in the ones that spoke the right one.
Fussy female.
Yeah. So if I'm a white wine drinker and you're only offering me red wine.
Yes. Yeah. Sexual selection has always been up to the females.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the octopus are the most clever in that regard, though, because they're bilateral. So you can have a cephalopod and an octopus or a giant squid that can kind of, on one side, go, hello, gorgeous, fancy a romantic tete-a-tete, candles, red wine or whatever with me. And the other side's going, go away. This is my territory. You're really most unwelcome here, and probably using lots of swear words, but I don't use that language. But you know what I mean.
Yes, yes.
Go away nicely. And they're lateralized down the midline of the body.
Yes. Do they go different colours on opposite sides?
Yeah, absolutely. And they do all these different shimmer patterns. The problem if you're an octopus or another kind of cephalopod, my baby cat's joining me, is that you're a living lunch. You have to be very good at mimicry and camouflage because predation pressure is huge.
Or you have to hide inside something. Yes.
Yes, or bring your own shell, bring your own armory and use it,
Now, I think, because I've had a couple of bird pets in my life, and I think you can form pretty much as good a relationship with a bird as you can with a mammal. I had a budgerigar, and it was okay to keep them in cages then. It's not so much now. It's regarded as a bit cruel now, but times have changed.
Yeah.
And more recently, I had a pet starling.
Like a Mozart starling.
I'm sorry?
You know the story of Mozart starling?
No. Do tell.
So that was the idea. So starlings are, as you know, with a pet starling, they're very intelligent animals, aren't they?
Yeah. And very affectionate too.
Very affectionate. I've just got a very affectionate mammal on my shoulder, by the way. He's 9 months old. He's called Moriarty because he's naughty. And Mozart starling was a fantastic vocal mimic, but it was thought, and this is the work of Professor King in the States, that he was actually the inspiration for his F-sharp, one of his F-sharp major.
Oh, right. Yes.
And the bird spontaneously did F-sharp versus F and gave Mozart the idea. Exactly. I can't whistle properly. I'd get my licorice stick and play the difference between F and F-sharp, but I feel this one will probably
inspired by a bird. And I bet Mozart took the credit.
Oh well, of course.
So on the subject of bird mimicry, this starling of mine, the children, when I was teaching, the children used to bring me these fledglings that had supposedly fallen out of the nest. Who knew? But anyway, somebody had to do something, and I ended up with them. But this starling of mine used to speak.
Oh, blowing you kisses.
Well, that's my way of doing it. He just opened his beak, but I could call him. He was free eventually, and he'd go across. He'd go across the road, and I could come out into the garden in the morning, and I could make the noise, and he'd come zooming across and land on my shoulder and do a poo. Which, of course, that's why we don't. That's why we don't keep temperate birds indoors, because their poos are wet.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's always a bit of damage limitation, but you know.
Yes.
Babies poo as well. It's just we've invented nappies for them.
Yes, that's right. Yes. And The other bird impression that I can do that nobody else seems to be able to copy much is the duck.
Oh, wow, that's impressive.
I've not really very much idea how I do it, but there it is. And it attracts them. I can go to a pond and they'll come to me.
Oh, that's amazing. So amazing. Oh.
Well, that's my performance finish for tonight.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Anyway, you were going to show us something about, what was it? Let me have a look. Cambridge Neuroscience. I see you're advertising for research students. That'll be an opportunity for somebody.
Yeah.
And where do I have? You had this this link that you gave me.
Oh, the bed tango one.
Which I can't find now, of course. Captured thought. There we are.
Oh yes. Oh
yeah.
no.
So I'll share that.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Let me just get rid of stop screen share. Start screen share. Captured thought. Have I done that right? No, I don't think I have. Select window. Chrome tab. Captured thought. Does it have any audio?
No, it's just there you go. Yeah. With all our stuff on it. Yeah. So that's about our Science Arts collaboration and how we use the science art. So the artist in residence and writer Professor Clive Wilkins, myself, and how we also integrate the fact that he's a member of the Magic Circle, so he's a proper magician, and we're on a tango floor. So we're also tango dancers, and how really, I suppose, what we feel is that with so many of these things, integrating transferable skills from science and the arts allows you to investigate things so much further.
Using conjuring skills on animals is amazing, isn't it? Because I've seen some reaction when a conjurer vanished something for the benefit of a chimpanzee.
Yeah.
The chimpanzee's jaw dropped.
Yeah. Well, the jays that succumb to magic effects as well, and we're using that now to look at understanding a little bit more about aspects of their cognition, because what magic effects are so good at revealing are constraints on our cognitive abilities, both in humans but also in other non-human animals, especially intelligent ones like chimpanzees and jays and other members of the crow family.
Shall I scroll through this captured thought for you a bit?
Sure.
Oh, the Science Foo group. Now that sounds a bit...
Oh, Science Foo camp. Yeah, so there we were talking about magic and what magic reveals about blind spots in seeing and roadblocks in our thinking.
And when you say blind spots there, you don't mean the blind spot in the eye where the optic nerve leaves. You mean...
No, I mean things that we know can see but don't see.
Yeah.
You know, a bit like wing mirrors. We know that there are certain bits we're just going to miss when we're driving, and that's why people invented wing mirrors. And there's something called change blindness. I suppose the most famous example of it is the gorilla in the room effect.
Yes.
Where you ask people to, you know, there's these American high school kids, and they're throwing a ball, and you have to count how many times it goes from one team to the other. And then some very, very large man, much larger than any of the high school kids throwing the ball, walks in dressed in a gorilla suit.
Yes.
Quite remarkable, really, and nobody notices until it's put down.
Yeah. That's a classic, isn't it?
We're so busy. And the best example of that is by Daniel Simons. And I think he calls it the monkey business illusion, if people want to check it out. Because there's all kinds of other examples of change blindness he does in the video. It's very cool. But the point is that, I suppose in psychology, we call it confirmation bias. You see what you expect to see.
Yes, yes.
And there's so many things that you don't see because you don't expect to see them.
Yes.
So you miss them.
Yes. And that's a human trait that we can't escape.
Absolutely. And the other one is egocentric bias. We think that what we want right now will be more similar to what we will want in the future than it will ever really be. And that we think that what others want is more similar to what we want than it will ever really be.
Why does that make me think of Brexit?
Yeah, well, indeed.
Anyway,
absolutely, I'm with you on that one, John.
Well, I think most people. No, I better not say anything. Could be construed as offensive. I wanted to ask you. You've got a couple of professorships in China, haven't you? How did that happen?
Well, that's also linked to the captured thought. So Clive and I have been invited to give a number of talks in China, and particularly we're interested in distinctions between I cultures, individualistic cultures, and we cultures, collectivist cultures.
Yes, yes.
And so we've been doing a lot of work on a lot of research on how that influences the development of thinking in young children, and how it influences the way parents talk to their children.
And whether or not they grow up. I'm thinking of a particular narcissist at the moment.
Yeah, and how they grow up and how they're scolded and all the rest of it.
We're in danger of getting political again.
We've been very honoured to be invited to have a bunch of professorships in these other countries. And I think, personally, I think one of the wonderful things about academia is it's so culturally diverse.
And so collegiate. It transgresses all the boundaries, race, religion, colour. It's just all about science.
Yeah, and it's all about sharing ideas.
Yes.
And there's something, for me anyway, that I find very beautiful about that. You know, my lab is full of people of many different shapes and sizes, colours, religions, cultures, you name it. Diversity, basically. And similarly, I think that having had the privilege and pleasure of working and living in different cultures, it's the best antidote to any kind of racist assumptions about things.
Yes. I like to think of it as like unifying field of activity rather than a divisive one.
Absolutely. You may have a different idea from someone else, but rather than say I'm right and you're wrong, or you're right and I'm wrong, let's discuss it. Let's unpack it. Let's explore the boundaries and the edges.
Yes.
And then with a holistic approach, we'll learn more.
Yes. The last thing you'd hear a scientist say would be, you're either with us or against us.
Like, what?
Yes. They're much more likely to say, let's think about this. Let's look at the evidence.
Yeah.
And not to get emotive at all, but just to academically consider.
Yeah.
You've been absolutely fascinating to talk to, Nikki. We've done an hour and it's gone just like that.
Yeah, it's gone so super fast.
Yeah,
Oh, Einstein would be proud of us about the relativity of time now, wouldn't he?
he would. Yes, yes. So I want to thank you very much for appearing. And
Pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. And I hope the listeners have enjoyed it.
I'm sure they have. And of course, it will become a podcast, and anybody will be able to see it in future, whether they're up,
lovely as well.
Whether they're up a tree in the Philippines or wherever, as long as they've got an internet connection for their laptop or their phone. Yes. So I'm just going to remind our viewers to like and share and what's the other thing? Subscribe to our channel. And I'm not really good at this, as you can tell. And next week, I'm not quite sure who we've got next week, but probably Chris Attlee and I will be taking apart the other half of that video that we were dealing with last week without any of the tech fails. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Nicola, once again. And here's the outro, your special outro.